Welcome, brave souls. You've arrived at Greywater Lake, a place where shadows breathe and the air whispers forgotten secrets. Tonight, you'll witness a tale of terror and despair as a couple faces the unseen horrors lurking in the depths. But beware, not everyone leaves this place unchanged.
The road to Greywater Lake wound through dense trees, the silence growing with each passing mile. The cabin finally appeared, its wooden structure weathered and old. "It's perfect," Emma said, breaking the quiet. I nodded, but something about this place made my stomach twist. We parked and unloaded our bags. The lake shimmered in the distance, but its stillness was unnerving, as though it hid something beneath its surface. Emma stretched, unaware of my discomfort. I tried to shake the feeling, telling myself it was just nerves from the long trip. Inside, the cabin felt heavy with age. The air smelled of damp wood, and the floor creaked underfoot. I ran my hand along the worn walls, noticing strange marks I couldn't quite make out. Emma, ever the optimist, had already begun unpacking, humming softly to herself. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cabin. The quiet was unsettling, and every sound seemed amplified. The rustle of leaves, the creaking of wood. "Want to take a walk by the lake?" Emma asked, but I hesitated, glancing toward the darkening water outside. We decided to stay inside, lighting a fire to chase away the chill. As the flames flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. Emma, sitting close to me, seemed unaware, but my unease was growing with every passing minute. That night, as we lay in bed, I found it impossible to sleep. Every creak of the cabin felt amplified in the silence. At 3 a.m., a soft knock echoed through the walls. I held my breath, waiting, but it came again, louder. I nudged Emma, but she remained fast asleep beside me. Heart pounding, I slipped out of bed and followed the sound. It led me to the basement door. The air was freezing as I turned the knob. The door opened slowly, revealing darkness below. I stepped back, an overwhelming sense of dread washing over me. Something was down there. The next morning, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling from the night before. As Emma prepared breakfast, I found myself staring at the basement door. "Did you hear anything last night?" I asked. She shook her head, but I knew something had happened, something I couldn't explain. I tried to ignore the strange feeling and helped Emma with chores. But as I passed by the mirror in the hallway, I saw something, just for a second, a shadowy figure standing behind me. I spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing there. Just the empty room and silence. Later, I found myself standing by the basement door again, drawn to it like a magnet. My hand hovered over the handle, but I hesitated. I had no intention of going back down there, not after what I'd felt last night. But that knock, it had been real. I knew it in my bones. That evening, the temperature in the cabin dropped suddenly. Emma wrapped herself in a blanket, shivering. "It's freezing in here," she muttered. I added more wood to the fire, but the cold persisted. Then the knock came again. This time it echoed through the entire cabin. We both froze. "Did you hear that?" Emma whispered. I nodded, my pulse quickening. The knock came again, louder this time, as if something was demanding to be let in. I stood up, glancing toward the basement door. Emma followed my gaze, her face pale with growing fear. I walked toward the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. Emma grabbed my arm, her eyes wide. "Don't," she said. But something compelled me to open it. The door creaked, revealing the dark stairs leading down. I stepped back as a rush of icy air hit us both. We slammed the door shut, bolting it closed. Emma's hands were shaking. "We need to leave," she whispered. But something told me it wasn't that simple. The cabin had us now, and whatever was in the basement wasn't going to let us go without a fight. The next few days were filled with strange occurrences. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut without reason, and cold spots appeared throughout the cabin. Emma tried to stay calm, but I could see the fear growing in her eyes. The poltergeist was making its presence known. One morning, we woke to find strange symbols scratched into the walls. They looked ancient, carved deep into the wood. I ran my fingers over them, feeling an unnatural chill. What do they mean? Emma asked. I didn't have an answer, but the symbols filled me with dread. As we sat by the lake that afternoon, the water was eerily still, reflecting the gray sky. Do you feel it? I asked. Emma nodded, her eyes scanning the water. It's like the whole place is watching us, she whispered. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking beneath. That night, the poltergeist became more aggressive. Furniture was flung across the room and a glass shattered on its own. Emma screamed as the lights flickered, plunging the cabin into darkness. I grabbed a flashlight, my hand shaking as I scanned the room for movement. In the dark, I saw it. A shadow darting across the walls, too fast to be human. Emma clung to my arm, her breathing ragged. What's happening? She cried. I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing for sure. We were not alone in that cabin. Something malevolent was with us. The air crackled with energy and the temperature dropped even lower. My breath fogged in the air as the shadow moved closer. I could feel its presence, cold and hateful, pressing down on us. We need to leave, I said, but as I reached for the door, it slammed shut on its own. Emma and I were trapped. The poltergeist wasn't going to let us go. The walls groaned, and a deep, guttural voice whispered from the shadows, speaking a language I didn't recognize. The lights flickered back on, and for a moment everything was still. But the danger was far from over. The following day we made plans to leave, but the poltergeist had other ideas. As we packed our bags, the door to the cabin slammed shut, trapping us inside. Emma screamed, banging on the door, but it wouldn't budge. I could feel the poltergeist presence growing stronger. The air in the cabin became thick, making it hard to breathe. Shadows swirled around us and the furniture began to move on its own. It's here, Emma whispered, her voice trembling. I grabbed her hand, trying to keep her calm, but I was just as terrified. We were at its mercy. The lights flickered, and then we saw it. A dark figure standing at the far end of the room. It was tall and faceless, its body flickering in and out of existence. Emma gasped, stepping back, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, staring at the entity before us. The poltergeist moved closer, its presence suffocating. I tried to speak, but no words came out. Emma clung to me, her grip tight as we backed away from the entity. It stopped just a few feet from us, its form shifting and twisting as if it were made of shadows and smoke. Suddenly, the poltergeist lunged at us and the air was filled with a deafening roar. We were thrown back against the wall, the impact knocking the breath from my lungs. Emma screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the poltergeist's fury. It wasn't going to let us escape. As I struggled to stand, I saw the poltergeist hovering over Emma. It reached out, its hand passing through her body. She gasped, her eyes wide with terror as the entity drained the life from her. I rushed to her side, but an invisible force held me back, keeping me away. I screamed her name, but it was too late. Emma's body went limp as the poltergeist vanished into thin air. I collapsed beside her, tears streaming down my face. The cabin was silent once more, but the damage had been done. The poltergeist had claimed its victim. I didn't leave the cabin for days, unable to face the reality of what had happened. Emma was gone, and it was my fault. I couldn't protect her from the poltergeist, but now I knew what I had to do. I had to confront the entity, even if it meant losing my own life in the process. I stood by the lake, staring into its dark depths. The water was still, reflecting the gray sky above. "Come out," I called, my voice hoarse. "I know you're here." For a moment there was nothing but silence, but then the water began to ripple, and the poltergeist emerged. It stood on the surface of the lake, its form dark and twisted. I could feel its anger, its hunger for more. "Why did you take her?" I shouted. But the poltergeist remained silent, its hollow eyes staring through me. I clenched my fists, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. The poltergeist moved toward me, gliding across the surface of the lake. My heart raced, but I stood my ground. "I won't let you take anyone else," I said, my voice shaking. The poltergeist stopped just a few feet away, its presence overwhelming. It was time to end this. Suddenly, the poltergeist lunged at me, its form shifting and twisting as it closed the distance. I braced myself for the impact, but just as it reached me, I felt a surge of energy. The air crackled, and the poltergeist was thrown back, its form flickering as it fought to stay in control. I felt a strange power surge within me, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I stepped toward the poltergeist, my hand outstretched. "You're done," I whispered. And with that, the entity let out a final ear-splitting scream before vanishing into the lake's depths once more. I collapsed to the ground, exhausted but alive. The lake was calm again, its surface unbroken. Emma was gone, but the poltergeist had been defeated. I stared into the water, knowing I would never return to Greywater Lake. The nightmare was finally over, but the scars remained.
The story may have ended, but nightmares have a way of clinging to you, following you into the dark. Tonight, when the shadows lengthen and you feel that creeping dread, remember, some nightmares don't end when you wake up. If this story left you uneasy and you crave more terror, hit the like and subscribe button. The real nightmare is only just beginning.